your camera, anything like that, you will be included in that recording. So just be mindful of that. So this morning we are so lucky to have someone very awesome with us to present and share information about financial aid and paying for college. So I'm so excited this morning to introduce Christian Zimmermann. He works in the financial aid office at CSM and truly is one of our favorite financial aid people. He is the best out there, and I know he's going to give us some great information this morning. So Christian, without further ado, I want to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. You just briefly saw my sixth grader run in and say hi because he has a nose for when I'm on meetings. So, morning everyone. My name is Chris Zimmermann. I am the Associate Dean for Financial Assistance at the College of Southern Maryland. So I will go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get the presentation started. So hold on just a second. All right. So hopefully you can see the screen, the full screen. So just make sure if everybody's seeing that, just let me know.
Looks good, Christian. We can see it.
Perfect. So this is a relatively small group. So normally I would say let's go ahead and hold the questions till the end. But because it is a relatively small group, if you do have anything that is urgent, feel free to kind of raise your hand. And if one of the counselors would let me know, just because of the way it's set up right now, I'm certainly happy to stop and answer the questions as we go through. Otherwise, we can wait, go to the end, and I'll answer those questions then. So what are we going to be talking about today? This is, since all of you are currently junior parents, it's a little early for you to be completing any of the financial aid information. So what this is going to be is more of a general discussion, a little bit on college comparisons, some things to look for, or some sites to use. What is financial aid? A broad overview. Some of the key terms to understand when working with financial aid, and things that the schools are going to explain to you. What is financial need? What are some of the basic eligibility requirements? It's not a full list, but some of the basic ones. And then different types, categories, and sources of financial aid. And then at the end, I'll briefly touch upon the FAFSA and give a couple of examples of different types of scholarships. But again, this is not a FAFSA completion workshop. So first off, sorry, let me go here. There we go. So college comparisons. There is no one single college that's going to be right for everyone. So it's important for students and families to really take a look at different types of schools, locations, programs, and really kind of try and find out what is going to be best for the student. So there are a number of different. Excuse me, if everybody wouldn't mind muting themselves or getting some feedback, I would appreciate that. So there are a couple of good websites that allow for some good comparisons. The College Board, you may know them from the SAT program, but they also do have some good college information. And then niche.com also is a good aggregator of information. Now, both of those sites are private sites, meaning that they do provide for an opportunity for institutions themselves to provide some information. So it may not be the same information from school to school, or they may have the opportunity to provide some brief descriptions, kind of introductions to the schools, things like that. So again, as you're taking a look at those, a lot of that information is going to be self-reported, but not necessarily all standardized. If you really want an apples to apples comparison of certain key metrics or information, you definitely want to go through something through the Department of Education called College Navigator. This is a website that aggregates information that schools throughout the country report to the Department of Education every year. So everything from the number of students, types of financial aid programs, percentage of students getting financial aid, some of the popular majors, graduation rates, retention rates, all of those standardized metrics. And you'll be able to take a look at colleges and really compare that same information from school to school to school, because what the schools are providing information on is standardized. So it is going to be the same type of information or the same source data from school to school. However, there really is nothing that is a good substitute for visiting the colleges to be able to get a better feel for how that campus fits the student. I know when I was looking at schools way back when, one of the things that my dad and I did when we were kind of doing some campus visits, we do the official campus tour through admissions, but then we would want to go to the cafeteria or coffee shop on campus, and just to get a hot chocolate or something like that. So we would ask just random students, how do we get to some place on campus, whether it was the bookstore for a t-shirt or something like that. And that kind of gave us, an unofficial, unvarnished view sometimes of, what the students were like. So that was just, kind of something. So again, you wouldn't necessarily get to be able to get that type of feedback, just from a website. But they definitely are a good starting place. Something else that's unique about Maryland in terms of programs of study is, Maryland participates in the academic common market, which is run through a Southeastern United States Regional Education Board. And you can see all of the states that are in the program there. And what this allows students to do is it allows students to attend a public university that is out of state. So Maryland residents can go to a public university in another state if they offer a program of study through the academic common market that is not offered in Maryland. So as an example, and I don't know if these are true, so please don't write down and say, Mr. Zimmermann said I could take this class, but let's just say aerospace engineering is something that that your student is interested in, and a university in University of Florida has that because they have a very large space program at NASA there, and that's not something that's offered anywhere in the state of Maryland. Your student can apply, certainly would apply to the institution, apply to that program of study, but then they would also fill out paperwork through Maryland Higher Education Commission, and if that program is determined to not be offered anywhere in the state of Maryland, that student could be considered could be eligible to receive in-state tuition rates for that program in Florida. So again, it is program specific. Maryland Higher Education Commission, MEC, has a list of programs that are eligible for Maryland residents to go outside of the state. We don't know what the fall 2023 application cycle is going to be, but it's generally going to be probably open from March 1st of next year through sometime in middle to end of June. A couple things to be mindful of if you're looking at public schools outside of the state of Maryland. Florida and Texas only participate on the graduate level, and the North Carolina system does not participate at all. So any of the other states in blue do participate in the program. And again, individual institutions may have additional restrictions above and beyond just meeting the program criteria. Oops. All right, so now we're going to get into what is financial aid. And again, this is not meant to be a fully in-depth, over-encompassing program. It's more of a highlight and get you kind of just down the right track. So what is financial aid? Financial aid is funds that are provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary education. They are funds that the student or parent don't already have, and they are coming from a third party. Financial aid can be used at many different types of institutions. It can be private colleges and universities, Stevenson University, Goucher, Hampton-Sydney, again, different types of schools like that. Public 2-year and 4-year colleges and universities, so University System of Maryland, St. Mary's College of Maryland, College of Southern Maryland, University of Virginia, things like that, University of Delaware. And then technical and vocational schools. So again, some of those trade schools, Lincoln Tech, things of that nature. So again, as long as the, all different types of schools are going to have different types of financial aid eligibility in terms of what they're eligible for. So what's available at one school may not necessarily be available at another school. So certainly as you're finding schools that are of interest to you, start asking those questions. What are the types of financial aid that are available at that institution? What is financial aid? What is the cost of attendance? So the cost of attendance is a broad figure that an institution creates that is an average cost for the students to attend that institution for one academic year. And the academic year is generally going to be for a traditional academic calendar, it'll probably be the fall semester, the spring semester, and then if the student's planning on taking any summer classes, that can be included as well. But the cost of attendance is made up of two different groups of expenses. You have the direct expenses, which means those are the expenses that the student will receive a bill from the institution directly. And I specify the student because ultimately it is the student that is making that contract or that agreement or that registration commitment with the institution, not the parents. So those bills and all of those responsibilities are going to be, from the institution's perspective, directed to the student. So direct expenses, again, it's going to be tuition and fees for the classes, the room and board if the student's living on campus. Then you have indirect expenses. These are other expenses that families should factor in when determining whether a student can afford to go to an institution. And those are going to be books and supplies, rent and food expenses if the student's living off campus or commuting from home, and other miscellaneous expenses. These are considered like out-of-pocket expenses, meaning they're things to be mindful of, but they're not necessarily going to be charged directly from the institution. And the cost of attendance can vary widely from college to college. The next slide is meant to give an example of how that cost of attendance can vary from institution. It is not meant to pick on any institution specifically. So what you see here, these are the stated costs of attendance for different types of institutions. And you can see that the column all the way on the right is what I would consider the sticker price. So when you're looking at purchasing vehicles, you have that sticker price on the window, but that may not necessarily be ultimately what you are paying when you purchase that vehicle. And similarly, from a college educational perspective, the cost of attendance is what an estimated cost would be. It's not necessarily ultimately what that student is going to end up paying when you factor in financial aid, if the student's not going full time, living off campus, things like that. So what I've highlighted here are the first two schools that are on the list, Georgetown and Stevenson. Both of those are considered private educational institutions. And what that means is they do not receive funding from the state or the city that they're located in. They are not subsidized by public funds, so therefore their tuition and fees, as you can see, are going to be significantly higher than the other institutions that are subsidized and are considered public institutions, the University of Maryland College Park and Salisbury. Both of those are examples of institutions that do receive significant funding from the states, in this case, the state of Maryland. Therefore, they're able to have a lower tuition rate for their students. When it gets to the room and board charges, you're going to see that Stevenson, University of Maryland, and Salisbury all are relatively similar in terms of what their average room and board charges are. Georgetown, a little bit more expensive. Again, part of that could be in DC in the Georgetown area. And then for College of Southern Maryland, because we do not have housing on campus, we do make assumptions for living expenses. And for our students, in this example, we make the assumption that these are traditionally aged students transitioning directly from high school to college, and that they are still living at home with their parents. And so again, you can see books, supplies, personal expenses, all of those are going to be similarly priced. And again, those are going to be estimates. And so that's how we kind of get to all of this. Again, not meant to pick on any school specifically, but just to kind of give you an example of when you're looking at private schools, public schools, and what the difference is. And you may be planning on looking at some public institutions that are outside of the state of Maryland, so potentially in Virginia or Pennsylvania, for example, or Delaware. So those public institutions, they're probably going to have a tuition and fee rate for out-of-state students that's going to fall probably somewhere in between the Stevenson and the University of Maryland figure. Again, it can vary significantly from school to school, but when you're looking at, as an out-of-state student looking at a public institution that's not in your home state, you are going to be paying a higher tuition and fee rate than those students that are residents of the state that that institution is located in. All right. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the technical aspects of financial aid, but again, big picture item. So what is the expected family contribution, or the EFC? This is an amount that that family can be reasonably expected to contribute towards college expenses. Um, it's really an eligibility index. It is used by institutions, federal government, state of Maryland, to determine what types of federal aid a student is going to be eligible for. So it's not an absolute dollar amount. It's really, think of it more as an eligibility index. It's going to be made up of two components. There's going to be a student component and a parent component. And then there's a number of different factors that go into that application, to the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, that are used to make up the EFC. Number of people in the household, number of people in college, age of the parents, amount of income, state of residence, amount of savings, a whole bunch of different calculations. So there is no single answer for what are my FAFSA results going to be. It truly does vary from student to student and from year to year. And that EFC index number is going to stay the same from institution to institution, because that information, if you have not already filled out a FAFSA for either for yourself or for an older child, that information is standardized, and it's a single application that you complete, and all of that information gets sent to different schools. So that information stays the same from school to school. So then we get into what is financial need. So financial need really is the difference between what does it cost to go to the institution and what is that eligibility index from the FAFSA that a student is eligible for. So the difference between those two is financial need. Now, because the EFC will stay the same no matter what institution you're going to, but the cost of attendance can vary significantly, that financial need can vary significantly from institution to institution. I'm just going to back up a couple pages to go back to this slide here. Let's say someone has an EFC of, we will make it easy, 30,000. So the FAFSA says 30,000. So if the student is applying to the University of Maryland, College Park, Salisbury, or College of Southern Maryland, they're going to demonstrate zero need, because if you take the cost of attendance minus the EFC, they're going to demonstrate zero need. Whereas with Georgetown and Stevenson, again, the student is going to have significantly higher financial need for those institutions, because those costs are going to be significantly higher than the other institutions. So while the EFC stays the same, because the costs to go to each school are vary significantly, that financial need can vary significantly from school to school. And the reason I say that to make you aware of that is, as you're applying to schools and receive financial aid award or offer packages, you're going to see differences potentially based on what the student's financial need is and the resources available from the institution. Okay, so what are some of the sources of financial aid? Again, I'm not going to go into in-depth in all of these, but just to kind of give you an overview, the federal government is going to be the single biggest source of financial aid programs. And these are going to be available to students throughout the United States. State of Maryland is going to be the next largest one through the Maryland Higher Education Commission. These are going to be funds that are distributed through the state of Maryland for Maryland residents generally going to school in the state of Maryland. Colleges and universities, again, they're going to have a lot of funding options available through their own institutional funding. Private sources or civic organizations and churches, again, these would be outside, could be the Rotary, it could be the Lions Club, it could be a local scholarship organization. So again, these are locals, these are different sources. And then employers, it's always good to find out if there are tuition assistance programs, either for students who are working at a particular institution, or even scholarships for children of employees for the parents, at their employers. So, and these are just some sources of financial aid. We'll talk a little bit about what are the different types of financial aid. So financial aid can be broken down into two main groups: gift aid and self-help options. So gift aid is what it sounds like. It's gift money. It is money that does not need to have to be paid back. And generally speaking, as you'll find out with financial aid, there are exceptions, and with most things, there are exceptions to all rules. Generally speaking, and what I mean by that is, generally speaking, scholarships are going to be awarded on basis of a unique merit, skill, or unique characteristic. So it could be grades, it could be SAT scores, it could be rank in class, it could be an athletic scholarship if the student's planning on participating in Division I or Division II sports. It could be an institution that has recently received a large donation from a donor who had a wonderful time when they were playing tuba in the marching band when they were at that institution. So they've wanted to create a scholarship endowment for students who want to play tuba in the marching band going forward. So that student who plays the tuba might be eligible for a scholarship. So again, those scholarships are going to be primarily based on, are awarded based on one of those types of characteristics. Then you have grants, which again are money that also do not need to have to be paid back. But the main difference between grants and scholarships are grants are going to be primarily based on financial need. That's not to say that no grant has a minimum GPA requirement or a program of study academic requirement, and that's also not to say that that no scholarships will have a minimum GPA to be eligible or for renewal. But again, so this is where we're saying primarily based on those awarding characteristics, but bear in mind each opportunity might have some unique requirements just to be aware of. And so again, grants are generally going to be based primarily off of the FAFSA results, but not necessarily 100%. All right, next we're going to go to self-help options. So self-help options are the other large type of financial aid. And basically what this means is the student will need to do something to receive those funds. So first is work study. Student, it is what it sounds like. It is a part-time job or opportunity where a student can receive assistance with funding based on having a part-time job, whether it's on campus in the bookstore or the library, or potentially partnering with local community service organizations. It could be the United Way, it could be the local school district to do tutoring for elementary school students, things of that nature. A lot of institutions have work study funds that are awarded to students in specific majors as partnerships. So it's an opportunity for students not only to receive some pocket money or spending money, but it also gives them the opportunity, if they've never worked in a either business environment or an education environment, gives them some real hands-on experience prior to graduation. So again, work study is going to be based on financial need. And this is one of those situations where not all institutions receive the same amount of work study funds. So not all students are necessarily going to be offered the same amount of work study or offered work study at each institution. And then loans. Loans are going to be either student loans, where the student is going to be borrowing directly from the Department of Education, or parent loans, plus loans, where the parent is going to be borrowing loan funds from the Department of Education to help pay for the student's education. Some of the general rules for these particular loans, because it's a little different than some of the other types of financial aid, there is a minimum enrollment requirement. Students must be enrolled at least half time, and that's generally going to be 6 credits per semester. But again, that half-time enrollment is defined by each institution. The student loans are going to be based on, are going to first be evaluated based on financial need. And then if the student doesn't have financial need or they're eligible for additional loans, then they would receive non-need-based loans. But the interest rate is the same on both the need-based and the non-need-based. The difference is the need-based, the federal government pays the interest while the student's in school. And then parent loans. Parent loans are going to be credit-based, so the parents would have to perform a credit check. If there are any concerns with that, they do have the opportunity to either rectify any concerns or have a co-signer with that. Whereas with the student loans through the federal government, students, they're not credit-based, they are enrollment-based, and then there is a maximum that students can borrow each year. All right, now we're going to talk about some of the unique programs in the state of Maryland. Maryland does have a number of different types of programs that are available for students, for Maryland residents that are planning on going to school in the state of Maryland. And before I go into each of these programs, I do want to say that generally speaking, 99.9% of the time, those funds do need to stay within the state of Maryland, meaning they have to go to an institution in the state of Maryland. The only exception to that is if it's determined by MHEC that a student is pursuing a program of study that is not offered anywhere in the state of Maryland, they can petition to the state to take those funds with them. So going back to my academic common market example of aerospace engineering, if it's determined that the student wants to go to that school in Florida and it is that major is not offered anywhere in the state of Maryland, the student was offered a senatorial scholarship, for example, they can make a petition or a request to MHEC to bring those funds with them out of state. So on to the different types of programs in Maryland. So first we'll talk about the need-based grants program. So the Guaranteed Access Grant Program is the largest need-based program in the state of Maryland. It is tied to the tuition and fees of the school in the University of Maryland system, or University System of Maryland, that has the highest annual tuition and fees, which I believe this year is the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. So if students are eligible for that grant, they can receive up to, I think it's just over $19,000 to go towards their education at any school in the state of Maryland. Now, I say up to $19,000 because it is based on the tuition and fees. So if the student is going to, say, College of Southern Maryland, they're not going to receive that $19,000 because our tuition is significantly lower. However, if the student is planning on going to a private institution like Johns Hopkins, where their tuition is going to be significantly higher, the award would be capped at that, potentially at that $19,000. The Educational Assistance Grant is another large volume need-based grant where students can receive up to $3,000 per academic year to study in the state of Maryland. Both of those programs do require students to be full-time. If the student's only going to be participating or going to school less than full-time, there are funds available that are awarded to each of the institutions for their part-time students. And those are funds that are awarded directly by the school rather than MHEC. Then our legislative awards. Excuse me. Your delegates and senators all have funding that has been allocated to them to award to constituents in their districts going to college. Each senator or delegate handles it slightly differently. Some have an application, some want a resume, some want an essay. I have heard of some wanting interviews. Others are just saying, you know what, send me your FAFSA and that's all I want to know. And yet others have decided they don't want to be seen showing any favoritism. So they actually turn their money back over to the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and MHEC awards those funds. So each legislator has a slightly different process. Generally, that process for applying will become known generally in the December, January timeframe of when the student is in their senior year in high school for the next academic year. So you have a little time to worry about that. But if you do have multiple delegates that represent your area, you can apply to all of them. And then the state of Maryland does have some programs for unique populations and some tuition waivers, again, for certain populations of students. So the Edward Conroy Scholarship Memorial Award is for the spouses or children of either service members or so military service members, public service, fire, EMT, police, that were either killed in the line of duty or 100% disabled as a result of an on duty in the line of duty situation. And so the students are eligible for tuition and fees, again, up to potentially $19,000 per year. Veterans of Afghanistan and Iraq conflicts, so military veterans that served in those conflicts may be eligible for additional scholarships from the state of Maryland. And then there are some tuition waiver programs. Students that have been placed into foster care at any point over the age of 13 or are considered unaccompanied homeless youth may be eligible for a waiver of tuition and mandatory fees at any public institution in the state of Maryland. Maryland National Guard members, so students who are members of the Maryland National Guard may receive up to a 50% tuition waiver at public institutions. And students that are receiving Social Security disability benefits based on their own medical situation, not a parent's, may be eligible for a waiver of tuition as well. All four of those tuition waivers, one thing to be mindful of, that those are only applicable to public institutions in the state of Maryland. So any private institution, with the exception of the Maryland National Guard, there are certain institutions that participate, are for public institutions only. Okay, so now I'm going to give a couple more program specific examples of some unique scholarships in the state of Maryland. You may have heard of the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship. This is what's considered a last dollar need-based scholarship, meaning it is going to be applied to a student's tuition and fees after other types of financial aid or scholarships or grants, not loans, but scholarships or grants have been factored into a student's tuition for the semester. Students must complete the FAFSA. There is a deadline, and it would be March 1st of the year that you are applying for, or before that you're applying it. And I'll explain a little more about timelines in a little bit, but just keep in mind that March 1st is a deadline for the state of Maryland. High school graduates must have earned at least a 2.3 GPA. So again, this is not a scholarship just for students that are the valedictorians of the institutions. It is really for it's for a wide variety of students in Maryland. There are some income requirements you can see here, depending on what your family situation is. There are income requirements. So those are going to be eligible. Those are going to be the eligibility requirements. And then once the student has been determined eligible to receive funding, they must be registered full-time. And the state of Maryland has defined that as at least 12 credits per semester. And they must maintain a minimum, a little higher GPA. And those eligibility criteria are reviewed each semester. Student can receive it for up to 3 years. And the maximum amount is up to $5,000 or the actual remaining tuition, whichever is less. So let's just say a student has a $6,000 tuition bill at CSM for between the fall and the spring, and they receive $3,000 in grants. So the maximum that they would be eligible for through this program would be the $3,000. So they wouldn't get the $5,000 because they have funding for some of their other tuition. Next is going to be something also through the state of Maryland called the Workforce Development Sequence Scholarship. These are for students that are planning on enrolling in some of the non-traditional programs that are considered workforce development. It could be welding, it could be HVAC, things of that nature that are going to be part of most likely the trades. And it is available to students who are either Maryland residents or Maryland high school graduates. And they may be relating to courses that are for job preparation or registered apprenticeship, licensure, or certification. So those are also offered through community colleges. So I've talked a little about the federal aid, talked a little bit about the state aid. I'm going to briefly touch upon institutional aid, and then we'll talk a little about the FAFSA and then wrap it up. So types of institutional aid, again, we've got merit and need-based. I talked about those a little bit before. Merit scholarships are going to be primarily coordinated or awarded through this institution's admissions office, because many of those awards are initially awarded for students as they're coming in through the admissions or application process. Again, they can be based on academics, athletics, or unique talents like that tuba player I mentioned earlier. And then you've got other types of institutional aid, which is need-based. So again, those are going to be primarily awarded through the financial aid office, again, potentially with input from other areas. And again, that is going to be based on need primarily, as determined by the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, which is required for all federal financial aid program, and then the CSS profile. So the CSS profile is a supplemental application that some institutions, primarily highly selective private institutions, requires a supplement to get a little more information on a family's financial situation that goes above and beyond what is included on the FAFSA. So if you're applying to colleges and there's no reference for a CSS profile, then you don't need to worry about that. But I also don't want you to be surprised if suddenly you're applying to an institution that says, okay, thank you for the FAFSA, now you need to complete this as well. And again, the last bullet point here is just a general reminder. Each school is going to have their own policies. School A may have a priority deadline for financial aid of January 1st. Another one may have February 15th, March 3rd, or March 1st. Others may have different deadlines based on when the students, what type of admissions the student's applying for, whether it's early decision, early action, regular decision. So again, it's important to not make an assumption that what the requirements or the deadlines are for school A are going to be the same across the board. Okay, so we're going to talk about the FAFSA briefly. What is the FAFSA? It's a standard form that collects demographic and financial information about the student and the family. It currently can be filed electronically or using a paper form. The Department of Education keeps promising to transition to 100% electronically. It hasn't happened yet, but it will probably in the next year or two. The information on that FAFSA is used to calculate that expected family contribution, the EFC, or that eligibility index. Colleges use that EFC to award financial aid. And so here's the little tricky part, and I'll go over this a couple times because it conceptually sometimes is a little confusing. So it can be filed at any point during the academic year. So we're going to pretend that all of your students right now are seniors. No, actually, we'll keep it as juniors. So they're juniors. So they're going to be applying for fall 2023. So they are going to be filling out the 2023-2024 FAFSA application, which will be available October 1st, 2022, which would be their senior year in high school. And it will use financial information from 2021. So 2 years prior to the application year. So I'll repeat that again. Your current students are juniors. They're going to graduate high school June of 2023. They're going to be applying for college for the 2023-2024 academic year. The 2023-2024 FAFSA application becomes available October 1st, 2022. And the financial information that will be on that application will be from 2021. So the tax information that will be due in April of this year is what will be used on the FAFSA for next year. So again, the FAFSA online website you can complete it at studentaid.gov. It does allow for electronic submission of the application. One of the benefits of doing the application online, not only because of the built-in edit checks, and they try and make sure that you complete information and some of it doesn't make sense. Like, for example, say you put your taxes paid and your adjusted gross income, you got those mixed up. So say you earned $50,000 and you had taxes of $5,000, but you said you had taxes of $50,000 on income of $5,000, they're going to ask about that. So it allows you to do some of those built-in edit checks. And then there's also an option called the IRS data retrieval tool, which allows for the Department of Education to connect directly with the IRS's website and database, and that if you have filed that FAFSA, that you have filed the tax returns, they're going to be able to pull that information over into your FAFSA and include that for the income information, which does speed up the process because when your FAFSA is then sent to the schools will know that your income information is correct and that we don't need to ask for most of the additional information to confirm that information. So both the student and the parent, if they fill out the FAFSA electronically, are going to sign it electronically using the Federal Student Aid ID or the FSA ID. Both the student and the parent if they are going to sign the FAFSA electronically, must have their own FSA ID. And when you're creating that FSA ID, it is based on, name, date of birth, social security number, but you also have to provide an email address. And only one email address can be used per FSA ID. So the student and the parent can't use the same email address to create FSA IDs, because if you forget your password and you get locked out of it, the Department of Ed is going to send reminder information to the email address on file. And if you've got two accounts with the same email address, that the data is not secure because you've got multiple people with the same access. So when you create that FSA ID, again, it's going to be different email addresses, but that's what it allows you to complete, not only the FAFSA, but if you're going to be completing any loan paperwork, and also allows the student and the parent to access their own financial aid history. So allows you to log in and see your account with the Department of Education and see, what all is happening. So you've completed the FAFSA. What happens next? So once the FAFSA is processed, the student receives their version of the report called the Student Aid Report, the SAR. You definitely want to make sure that that information is accurate. You want to make sure that you didn't forget to include parents in the household or other siblings. You want to make sure that the income information is correct. You don't want to have added another zero onto the income, or you don't want to have mixed up the parents' income with the student's income. Trust me, if you put the parents' income of, let's say, $50,000 on the student side, you're not going to like the results. The student's definitely not going to like the results, because that income that's listed there will have a significant difference and have an impact on the accuracy of that EFC. Once the schools have received the FAFSA, they will be reaching out to you to let you know what the next steps are. There are verification requirements, meaning institutions are required by the federal government to confirm the accuracy of a certain percentage of applicants. So if the student does get notified that they've been selected for verification, that doesn't mean that they did something wrong or that the Department of Education thinks that they're lying. It's a requirement to make sure that the taxpayer dollars are going to eligible students, and make sure that the information is correct. Schools will use that FAFSA and additional information to determine that financial aid award. So what that could be is the financial aid office will be notified by the admissions office that the students received, a merit-based scholarship, and we would include that in the financial aid offer letter. So how do the institutions again award aid? We review the FAFSA results, which is used to determine federal, state, and institutional aid via the ESC. Institutions that utilize the CSS profile may also use that information to determine institutionally based financial aid. They cannot use that to determine any federal or state aid. Outside scholarships would be included in the overall financial aid package. So the net price calculator is something that all institutions that participate in federal financial aid programs are required to have on their website, which allows students, as they are shopping for schools, to kind of get an estimate as to what a student in a similar type of profile, whether it's family size, income, all of that information, might be eligible to receive in terms of financial aid. The net price calculator is an estimate. It is not something that you can go back to the financial aid office and say, on March 10th of this year, I completed the net price calculator. This is what it said, and this is what I'm definitely eligible for. Again, it is an estimate just to give you an idea of what you might be eligible for. And then moving on, here are some additional sources of information. Again, the federal student aid is part of the Department of Education, studentaid.gov. They do have a lot of good information, not just on the financial aid programs, but you can see at the top picture there that there's different sections of a student's life cycle, considering school, in school, if you're a parent, or if you're in repayment. So again, that's some good information there. And then the Maryland Higher Education Commission, or mhec.maryland.gov, does provide a lot of information, not just on financial aid programs, but also what programs and degrees are offered in the state of Maryland. They have information on the academic common market, things of that nature as well. So we do have some scholarship search engines. So these are some aggregators, which is so basically they are not where you would necessarily apply for scholarships. What they do is specifically for the bottom three, fastwebscholarships.com and College Board, you can do a search based on some characteristics that you have. You may be, a left-handed trumpet, baseball playing, biology major who wants to go to a Midwestern institution. So you plug in some of that information, and that will give you a listing of some of the scholarships that you might be eligible for. Again, it's going to be up to the student to apply specifically for those opportunities. And then the Department of Education's website is just giving you some information on what scholarships are and potentially how they can be used. But that's not necessarily a search engine. That is more of just a kind of an educational resource. All right, so I'm going to briefly touch upon CSM dual enrollment because I know all of you are junior parents, but you are working with your students, if they are planning on attending college after high school. The CSM Dual Enrollment Program, if you're not aware of it, does allow high school students to get a jump start on their college careers. It allows them to take classes while still in high school. Some of these classes are right in the high school, so they could be sitting in their math class in Calvert High School, or they could be taking classes at the Prince Frederick campus on 231, or even online. High school students are eligible for a 50% tuition discount. So again, not only does it allow them to give them a head start, but it is going to be at a discounted rate. And then students, those credits do transfer to other schools, both in the state of Maryland and outside the state of Maryland. And then this is our contact information, and that is the end of my presentation. So I will leave this up for just a minute, and then I will go ahead and stop the show so that way we can see if there are any questions.
So feel free, everyone, you do have questions, you can just raise your hand, put them in the chat, whatever is easiest for you. We had a question in the chat about the other sessions. They are all available. All the recordings are available from each of our junior breakfast sessions. They're all on YouTube on our channel. And I can send out the links later on today as well.
Thank you for pointing that out, Libby. I do understand that Maryland does have one of the aerospace engineering, and also Florida doesn't participate as an undergraduate. So it wasn't the best example, but it was the first thing that popped up in the morning when I didn't have my coffee yet. Let's take a look here. And I have a feeling that I will be learning more and more about the engineering programs throughout the state of Maryland as my son has decided he wants to be an engineer. He's not sure what type yet. We do vary, but I have another 5 years to worry about that. So can a parent apply for a loan for students if they are still paying off their own student loans? So the answer to that is yes. Parent loans, so the PLUS loans are going to be credit-based. As long as the student's not in default or have not paid their own student loans off within the time frame, that would automatically disqualify them from a parent loan. But otherwise, it is going to be credit-based. So the Department of Education will do a credit check, and it'll basically be a debt-to-income ratio. So as long as you are current on your student loans and are in a good status, you absolutely can apply for a PLUS loan, even if you are still repaying your own student loans. So great question regarding the FAFSA. The FAFSA is completed under the student's account because it is the student's application. So there are going to be questions that will ask for what is your income or what is your social security number. On the application, that is referencing the student. If they want parent specific information, they will say, what is the last name of parent one? What is your parent's social security number? What is your parent's income? So it is filled out under the student's quote unquote account, but the parent does need to sign in and sign their portion of the application. Okay, it looks like those were the only questions.
May I ask a question out loud?
There's a hand.
Easier than typing. When you're entering the FAFSA information into the student's account, is there the ability to save half the information and then go search for an answer and come back the next day?
Yep, as you're completing the FAFSA, it's going to be a multi-screen process. And each screen that you go through as you save and go to the next one will allow you to restart either at that page or at the beginning of that section. So I think there are 5 or 6 different sections. So you may not necessarily be able to save at the same exact spot or start at the same exact spot where you ended, but worst case scenario, you'll start at the beginning of that section.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
And just as a reminder too, this is our last session in our junior breakfast series. And we're going to record today's session. Well, I am recording it, and then I'll upload that and share the link with you all as well. And I'll share all the other links from the other sessions too, in case you missed those. But does anybody have any other questions for Christian this morning? And again, you can just raise your hand, you can unmute, you can put in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. I don't think we have any takers, Christian.
So one final piece of information. So I know it's a little early to be doing the financial aid process, but in the fall, come October, once you get inundated with information, not only from the wonderful staff at Calvert, but from the schools that your child has been expressed interest in, if you do have any questions or concerns or need assistance with completing the FAFSA, CSM is here to help. You don't have to plan on coming to CSM. It is a community resource. We are absolutely here to help students. And provided things get a little more back to normal, we do anticipate having some group sessions where we will have staff on hand to help complete the FAFSA, and probably on a weekend at the Prince Frederick campus. So once we have those scheduled, we'll be sharing that along with with all of the high schools, so that information will be passed along as well. And again, feel free to join us. You do not have to, by coming, you don't have to say that you're coming to CSM. Most of the families that we actually do work with at these sessions do not end up coming to CSM. So we won't take it personally.
And at Calvert High too, don't forget, you guys heard from Michelle Kidwell from Chesapeake College Plan at our last session. She's also always available to help and, help out with any financial aid or FAFSA questions. She's very good. So Chris, we want to thank you so much for coming this morning. I mean, you are one of our favorite people because you are tip top with your knowledge, and we just love that you are always willing to come and share with us. So thank you again for giving up your time this morning and coming to share all this information with us. You're wonderful. We appreciate you so much. So, all right, everyone. Well, I think that's about going to close us out today. So thank you everyone for coming. And please reach out to us at any time if you have any questions, because as parents, while this may be your first or second time going through this, as counselors, we go through this every year. So if you have any questions at any point in time, let us know. If we don't know the answer, we will find someone who does. So thanks again for everyone coming today, and we hope that everybody has a great day. Bye, everyone.